welcome. It's been a long while since we touched base with the platinum industry. So in today's show, we're going to be talking acquisitions and BEE transactions with Northam Platinum's CEO, that's Paul Dunn. I'm Nozi Pombanjwa, and this is Resource One. Let's kick off with the market wrap for this week.
Gold Fields has posted a $14 million net loss for the March quarter, with a 25% decline in output from its mechanized South African mine South Deep. Overall production was 10% lower for the quarter, but the miner still expects a full-year target of 2.2 million ounces. Impala Platinum and Lonmin have begun talks with South African unions on closing unprofitable shafts as mining companies battle rising costs and low prices. Job cuts are unlikely as the second and third largest platinum producers plan to raise output at newer, higher margin shafts. And South32, the company being spun off from BHP Billiton in mining's biggest such deal in almost a decade, has been approved by shareholders. South32 will become the world's largest producer of manganese ore and will operate the biggest silver mine.
Now, the platinum sector has been under pressure amid weak prices and strike action here in South Africa. And of course, we saw all of that unfolding last year. The question is now, has the eye of the storm passed? To answer that question and much, much more, I'm now joined by Paul Dunn. He is the CEO of Northam Platinum. And of course, Northam is in the process of tying down a big BEE deal. And we start off with that point, Paul. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. 6.6 billion rand and also translating into equity that surpasses the targets that we've seen in South Africa. Talk to us a little bit about the rationale behind the deal.
Good evening, Nozi. Yeah, we've took the view at Northam that it is in our interest as a company and in our shareholders' interest that we at least meet the mining charter requirement on ownership. The reason for this is that we have aspirations to grow the company. In order to grow the company, we need to perhaps make acquisitions, for instance, and with acquisitions sometimes you need a mining right approval. And of course, government is quite important in terms of the regulatory activity that the DMR fulfills. If one hasn't achieved the ownership level, it's not necessarily as easy to get a mineral right.
Let's talk a little bit more about the deal. You spoke about acquisitions, and I'll talk about Everest in a moment. But what is the future of this BEE transaction? There are rumors in the market that there could be a potential listing. Give us clarity in terms of what does the medium to long-term view look like?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting transaction in the way it's been, the mechanics of the transaction, if you wish, and the funding of the transaction. In essence, it's a vendor financing transaction between the current shareholders and the future shareholders being our empowerment partners. The company, in essence, is providing a facilitation arrangements for that transaction and also providing some guarantee. It's actually a secondary guarantee in terms of the ultimate financing of the transaction. So it's a fully funded, fully underwritten transaction, underwritten by our two major shareholders, the PIC, very important shareholder to us, and Coronation in Cape Town. Fully underwritten, and then every shareholder in turn has a right to participate should they wish or should they not. The size and magnitude of the transaction demanded a shareholder vote. We have recently had a general meeting to take the vote. The vote was overwhelmingly supported. We had a very high number of shareholders turn out, in excess of 90%, which in itself is remarkable. And of the people who turned out to vote, 99% have approved the empowerment transaction. So this is quite interesting, I would say, is that, you know, there's a lot of emotion about empowerment in South Africa at the moment in particular.
But it must set the bar for you to deliver even higher. 99.9% approval also means that there is an expectation that this transaction, 6.6 billion rand, is going to yield even more benefits for your shareholders. What are they expecting from you and your team in the next financial year?
Well, of course, shareholders are not going to finance a transaction for nothing. And in return, the current shareholders, the ordinary shareholders, receive a preference share or have entitlement to participate in a preference share arrangement, which has a coupon rate of 12.75%. It's actually prime plus 3.5%, it's a floating coupon, which is an attractive yield on a debt instrument. So that's what the ordinary shareholders get in return for financing the empowerment shareholders.
It's certainly a very innovative approach to financing BEE transactions in South Africa. Let's put the rumor to rest, and that is of the potential listing. Where are we on that front?
Yes, the Zambezi Platinum, which is the overarching commercial entity that will hold the empowerment shares, will be listed on Monday morning on the main board of the JSE. So that is, if I remember rightly, it's the 11th of May. So early in the morning we'll be blowing the horn and banging the drum, and I think quite a celebration. In fact, it's not often you get a listing on the platinum sector. Absolutely.
I mean, it's quite an accomplishment in the sector and a very important milestone for you. But of course, everybody also always watches the board after a listing and after the drum has been banged. Any expectations in terms of what are you expecting the trades to look like on that day?
Well, we've priced the instrument at 41 Rand, so that will be the issue price. And as I've explained, the coupon rate is quite attractive at 12.75. So let's see. I think the market will price it accordingly. So we're also interested to see.
That is that's quite fantastic news, and we'll be looking forward to that. Let's talk about Everest for a moment and your acquisition pipeline. You did speak about growth, and the understanding is that there is an acquisitive appetite within Northam. What does your pipeline look like?
Well, before I get to the pipeline of M&A activity, perhaps I should also say that the empowerment transaction goes along with a capital raise.
Right.
So there is a net 4 billion rand of cash that flows to the Northam balance sheet. It essentially makes the Northam balance sheet pound for pound, if I can use boxing terminology, which is quite
I won't
topical.
ask who you voted for, who you were supporting on the boxing, but I know many will say Mayweather at this point. But 4 billion rand, that's quite an injection coming onto the balance sheet. Where are you going to be redirecting that capital?
Yeah, so what it does, it positions the balance sheet very strong relative to the weak sector.
Yes.
So asset prices relative to that cash on the balance sheet can be perhaps picked up at a reasonable price. Obviously, willing buyer, willing seller. So we are targeting what we would phrase as shallow, mechanizable ore bodies. And assuming we can do a transaction, we would, of course, use some of the cash that we've raised to pay for that asset.
There's also has been a view in the market that you could be a potential buyer for some of Anglo's platinum assets that they're looking to get rid of. Are you after those? Are they on your radar? Are you going to be spending that 4 billion rand on those assets?
We have had a look at there's one particular asset maybe you were referring to there. We did participate in the diligence process, but we have since withdrawn. It didn't quite fit with the Northam strategy.
How would you describe the current administration and how they've handled policy certainty in South Africa?
I think perhaps we must just differentiate between policy certainty and the intent of the policy. I think the intent of the policy is reasonably clear. The measurement and achievement and so on, that's perhaps where difference of opinion comes between perhaps government and mining companies. In our view, we've taken the view that shareholders do not like uncertainty. So through this transaction, what we have done for our shareholders is provide them with certainty for at least 10 years, which is the term of the transaction we've been speaking about. During the course of 10 years, we would assume that the clarity will come to the fore.
Perhaps give us a sense of what are your forecasts telling you about the dynamics of the platinum market? Are you foreseeing better performance in the next financial year? What are the supply and demand dynamics looking like for the platinum price?
It's certainly been a tough 2 years for the whole industry, and dollar prices in particular are quite depressed at the moment. However, what Northam sees, and we do take advice on supply and demand dynamics, is a fundamental shortfall in these metals. These metals are used for their fundamental elemental properties. It's very difficult to substitute them. The demand for the metals is growing pretty much in line with world GDP. Therefore, we feel demand is healthy, There is a fundamental supply deficit. It's being bridged at the moment by on-surface stockpiles, which are not easy to quantify, but without a shadow of a doubt, they are being eroded as we speak. And we feel that we'll see a more favorable dollar pricing environment towards the end of our planning period. Normally, we set sort of quite formal 1 year to 5 year period, and we think by 2018, 2020, maybe we'll see a better dollar price. We're going to position the company for that time.
Big thank you to Paul Dunn, CEO of Northam Platinum. Now, we know that power generation is still a major focus here on Resource Watch. Here's our gem of the week.
In the midst of the hustle and the bustle of everyday city life, solar panels planted on rooftops quietly extract energy from the sun, converting it to usable electricity mankind has come to depend on. Local engineering firm Powertech says this form of renewable energy, formerly known as solar rooftop photovoltaic, or PV, is a viable solution for South Africa's large energy users, who are subject to high tariffs. The firm intends taking this product to the market, and it started at home, installing the system at its Pretoria headquarters. Each panel is fitted with 60 cells. Now, the cells convert the sun's rays into electricity. Now, on this roof are 256 panels with a generation capacity of 60 kilowatts. Now, that's enough to power about 100 homes. The solution is aimed at companies with large roof space and constant demand. These would include mining companies, commercial property owners, and industrial facilities.
Our corporate clients will, with this system, have the benefit of having grid electricity as well as an alternative renewable energy power source that will be run in parallel with the grid system, and under certain conditions will then give them a saving in the long term for the electricity account.
This is because the solar PV system can also form part of a smart or microgrid where electricity usage automatically switches between power sources as and when needed. Christine Mundwa, CNBC Africa, Pretoria.
And that's it for this week's show. Do stay in touch. That's by following me on Twitter @TheRealNosin. Don't forget the hashtag for this show is Resource Watch. Until next time, it's goodbye.